Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. I'm Rosemary Tucci, Community Engagement Manager at Claris, and I hope it's not too late, but I do want to wish all of you a Happy New Year. I think we're not halfway through January yet, so that greeting has not expired just yet. And joining me today to introduce the new Claris MCP for FileMaker are Yichen Yang from the Claris product management team, Louis de la Parra from the engineering team at Claris, and Michael Wallace from Empowered Data Systems Solutions. And also Martha is helping produce, so she'll be here to help answer your questions and just keep everything on track. And so just a few housekeeping things before we get started. First, please let us know what your experience is with AI and MCP by clicking on the apps button and selecting Slido. If you have questions during the session, please put them in chat and send them to everyone. That way people in the audience can see them and may answer. And also that's what I'll be watching to ask questions of our panel today. And we have lots of demos and time for questions and answers planned. So while everybody fills out the poll, I'm just going to ask all of you to introduce yourself, just a couple sentences about who you are, and also, do you have a Claris-related New Year's resolution? So Yichen, why don't you start?
Hi everyone, my name is Yichen. I am product manager at Claris. I just joined recently as of last year. And my New Year resolution is to become more expert at everything FileMaker and AI.
What about you, Louis?
Hi, I'm Louis de la Parra. I'm an engineering lead at Claris. My resolution is to continue to expand Claris's AI portfolio and empower folks to build awesome tools.
And what about you, Mike?
Yeah, Mike Wallace. I'm Power Data Solutions, and my primary thing is to slow down on my study enough on AI and all that kind of stuff to make more videos to try to share more with the community. And done a lot of testing and things like that, but looking forward to spreading the wealth. So.
All right, and just so you all know the experience of our audience today. Most people first, in answer to the question of what best describes your experience with AI features in FileMaker, about half haven't used any AI features yet, but are here to learn and discover the possibilities. 40%, I've experimented with AI features, but haven't deployed anything in production. And 10% say I regularly use AI features in my workflows. And I also got a back channel chat that said missing an option. I have installed AI in production, but we're not using it regularly. And then for how familiar are you with MCP? Almost half, brand new to me. I'm excited to learn what it can do. Also 45%, I've heard of it, but haven't had the chance to use it yet. And 9%, I know MCP and have implemented it in my projects. And the last question of when do you plan to install FileMaker Server 2025 in production? 70% of our audience are already running Server 2025 in production, which means they're all set to start experimenting with MCP. And then the rest are about, looks like 20% in the next quarter and about 13% in Q2. So it's good to hear that almost all of you have plans to get to the latest FileMaker server. So thank you all for sharing your experience to help our panelists pitch their presentation to the right level. And with that, Yichen, why don't you start by just introducing what is MCP and what does it empower developers and end users of FileMaker apps to do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rosemary, for the introduction. We're really glad to be here to talk about Claris MCP, a feature that helps FileMaker developers more easily integrate AI with their FileMaker solutions. So a little bit about MCP. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's an open standard that was introduced by Anthropic in late 2024 to really standardize how large language model applications integrates with external data sources. Think of it like a universal translator. So an analogy that people like to use is the USB-C. So since its introduction, MCP has been widely adopted across the tech industry with a lot of support and implementations emerging from major companies such as OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and others. Many other startups as well, building these agentic and AI-powered workflows. So MCP recently was donated to the Linux Foundation, where it is now maintained as an open, vendor-neutral, and community-driven standard. So Claris MCP is a new functionality from Claris built using this protocol, designed to bridge the gap between FileMaker and AI applications. So instead of needing to build custom integration for every single AI tool, Claris MCP provides a standardized way for AI applications to really understand and interact with your FileMaker data and scripts with permission-driven controls. You don't need to do any coding, and it's purely done through configuration, which we'll see shortly from Louis as well as Mike. So looking at this diagram, you can see how a user interacts with an AI application, which then communicates with your FileMaker application through Claris MCP. This means we're essentially giving FileMaker a voice that AI can understand, which allows for a more natural conversational interaction with your existing FileMaker solution. So why does this matter specifically for our FileMaker developers? Claris MCP introduces a low-friction way to connect AI with your solution in an easy setup. It's all about configuration, not coding. And we have heard from our customers that they were able to get it set up within just 5 minutes. It allows AI to trigger approved FileMaker scripts and access data based on the permissions that you define. So you maintain control over security, permissions, and your business logic.
Thank you for that introduction, Yichen. So just like to clarify, and my understanding of MCP is MCP lets an AI tool like Claude use my FileMaker data and scripts to do things. Like, for example, and I think we'll see some of these, create new records with natural language. So rather than having a user interact in FileMaker, they're interacting with FileMaker through the AI tool.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So Mike, you've been experimenting and very actively helping give feedback as we first developed Claris MCP. So why don't you show us some of the things that you've done to date?
All right. Thank you. And go ahead and show this screen here. So I'm not going to spend any time on this because Lou's going to go over this, but this is the dashboard that you use to interact and set up the connections to the MCP configuration. The only reason I do that is kind of just want to show you a very quick thing that I thought was kind of cool. So OpenAI has a new browser called ChatGPT Atlas that actually can be agentic and run things for you. And I actually used it to fill out information that was needed for here. I actually exported the tables DDL with the new function in FileMaker for all my tables, so I had all of the field comments, that kind of stuff for the fields that I wanted to work with. And then I gave that information, added that as context here, and this browser on this agentic browser here is going through and filling out the form in our in the MCP configuration just by looking at that text, parsing it out, and then filling out here. So just a little side thing that I thought was kind of cool. But moving on to actual useful stuff here, we have, well, I mean, I think that's useful, but we have the, I have a prompt that I set up, and Lou's going to show you a more basic setup. This actually is using what's called Claude skills, which I will be on the community. I'll post the skills and the prompts and things like that that I would use for this. But and this demo is about populating a database with test data. This could be useful for a customer who may be hesitant to give you the original data, or you have a starter solution. As you can see, I'm using the core CRM starter solution from Liz DB Services. I hope I got that right. And so you can populate that with data for a target audience that you're going to present your starter solution to a customer. And in this case, this is going to be for a solar panel installation company. Or maybe you're creating a new database and you just want some logical data in there that you want to be able to test with, that kind of stuff. So I have a pretty long prompt here that but there's no specific data in the prompt. It's just generally I say, these are the kind of things that I want you to create. And again, I will provide this prompt to y'all for you to look over. But then, and let me just copying that in, pasting it in, and so it's going to start right away, and it's already starting to create items in the database through that MCP connection. And there is one issue with Claude desktop that I've seen, where I think that when it's compacting the context at the same time while it's running on a long process, it will just kind of restart this thing. So I set up my prompt accordingly to tell it to go and check the database to see where you are in this process, and then pick up from there. So it started off saying, oh yeah, there's no records, and then we're already on contacts now. So it's creating, in this database, contacts are actually the companies, and then there are additional contacts, which are the people within the companies. And so it's going through, and that's not just creating these contacts, it's actually creating quite a bit of information of appointments and notes, like a whole story that it created for each of these customers. So it creates a whole story of, like, here are all the appointments that would be needed to run through this whole process of creating this solar panel installation, and all of the things of, like, notes, like, hey, they called me, I called them, they called me, I called them. All of those kind of notes are in here, and it made them all up based on the information. I have it set up with the skills to use consistent data. In other words, the emails should match the domain name, things like that. But it goes through, and now it's creating the sales records for these different so the line items off of the items that it created. So it first created the items, then it created the contacts. Now it's creating the sales records with the line items in them. And it does, again, it periodically does stop, and I just hit tell it to continue, and it picks back up again. The next one that I'm showing, which may be a little intimidating for some people, you see we're at 40 minutes right now, but again, this is not something that you have to watch. You can set this up and prompt it and then let it run. And for this one runs for about 53 minutes, I think. And then I stop it, because this running through Claude Desktop is a little slower than running through Claude Code, which I'm going to show you next. But it is creating all of these invoices, and I guess it gets up to about 5 invoices on this side, and then I stop it. Some people are nervous about Claude Code because of the word code in it. But to be honest with you, Claude Code is just simply the exact same thing we just saw, but it just happens to run in the terminal. And all I have to do to start it is type Claude after I install it, which is really easy to do. I install it with one command, and then I type Claude, and then I have it in my terminal. And people have realized that it's a whole lot more powerful and a whole lot more useful than just for coding. You can do all of these kind of things, interacting with files and everything like that through it. And again, this is all, pardon me, using the FileMaker's MCP to talk back to that. So I have a couple of prompts that I've added here that I'm going to be using in this. And but the main thing is I don't want you to worry about the actual Claude code itself, because it's really not that scary. You're not actually using terminal commands other than Claude in order to use it. It just happens to be text-based, like chats are. And I give it permissions to do different things as it goes, like, hey, can I edit this file, or can I do this? And I say yes, or yes all the time, or whatever. So here it goes. And you can see after 2 minutes, I already have quite a few items that I'm moving on to contacts. And so now it's creating these contacts again with the same appointments and notes and all that kind of stuff. And you see it's full notes. They're logical and make sense in the context of this story. And this could be any story that you want, as far as the story you're telling about this customer that you are going to visit or whatever. It makes your information a whole lot more presentable, because you're looking at, like, here's the installation. This task is the appointment for the installation to begin, an appointment for coordinating the logistics of building access, all that kind of stuff. And I keep going up to the top left to try to close that dialogue. But so anyways, I told it here, it says so it's going through and it's creating the notes. See, I think it's this point. Oh, it's still working on the different contexts at this point, but I just want to show how it was creating the notes and that kind of thing. So it hasn't gotten to the sales yet. And now we're getting into the sales functionality.
Yeah.
And also, Claude does create a checklist of things for it to do, and it runs through that thing in a very agentic way. It ran into a problem here trying to update the quantities. It figured it out, and now it updated the quantities. So all this is working, logically as it goes, coming up with solutions, figuring out how to update the database. When it fails, it corrects itself and keeps on moving. And so you can see populates the data. There is an issue that I had with it actually populating the quantities up front, so it creates the line items and then it goes back and fills in the quantities. But again, just going through, we're at 28 minutes, and I think that we only have about 3 minutes. I may skip forward some here, but this is, again, because all this is doing is just doing more of the same. We're up to, okay, so it got up to about 20 invoices, and I told it, hey, I realized it only created 4 contacts instead of 5, which I had originally asked for. So I just told it, hey, you only give me 4, give me 5 with all the related records and that kind of stuff. And it went through and finished up, created the 5th contact with all the people and notes and appointments and everything like that. So that is this. This is all using the Claris MCP, and I know this over here looks kind of matrixy, but don't let it scare you. The only thing you really need to worry about is the last little line at the bottom where it talks about, here we go. We have 5 customers, 4 won and 1 lost, 10 additional contacts, 25 notes, 14 plus events, 15 sales orders, and 153 plus sales line items that were created in whatever that timeline was, about 43 minutes. So the next thing I want to show you is actually querying.
Hey, Mike, just
Yeah.
add some questions and feedback. So first, just to clarify, Core CRM is from Productive Computing. So just wanted to make sure that we clarified that.
Okay. Sorry about that if I got that wrong. I don't remember what I said.
That's okay. Second, I saw a couple of things flash by that, wow, this went from 0 to warp speed I can't do anything with this. So I just want to like clarify the order we're working through today. So Mike is showing advanced stuff to kind of inspire you about what is possible. And then we're going to take a step back in the second half today where Louis will walk through the initial configuration. So we're just kind of going rather than, so we're showing you running first on purpose because we want to help inspire and open your mind to what's possible now rather than kind of just do this more as a training. And there were a couple of questions. Mike, can you just explain where the data came from? Like how, like what did you just show in just a few sentences?
Claude created this from scratch. I said a solar panel installation company, and it came up with mid-tier solar panel with 400 watt output, 21.1% efficiency, 25-year warranty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It created all of this data. I have in my Claude skill, I do have a Faker library that it can use, but honestly, I don't think it is at all. It's basically just using its own experience for all the training data from the whole internet that's been pumped through it. And it knows what a solar panel installation looks like. And so it went through and figured out unit prices and quantities needed. So like wiring, it needs 1,500 feet or whatever this is, per foot, 1,500 feet of wiring that's needed for this and everything else. So this is actually creating all of this data on the fly with no source. So it's completely original data that is created by Claude and put into the FileMaker database for testing purposes. So that's what the point of this demo is that you can get some really good testing data that you can show to a customer and say, hey, this is what it would look like in my example database, or if this new feature that doesn't have any data yet, you can have it populate that. So any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, so there were a couple of comments. People are like, why would I ever want to do this? And I think to me, this is something that, if you're a consultant and you want to give a personalized demo to your customers, you can do very quickly create realistic data that will be meaningful to the person you are showing this demo to. And so if you're an in-house developer working on a single application, you may not need that. But
you might need it for something like a new feature that you're producing, and you want to be able to test it for charting or reporting or whatever, and there's no data yet. And so you can have Claude generate that data for you that looks realistic and something that is going to challenge your assumptions on your scripts to make sure that it's going to work. What you wrote is going to work well.
Right. So other question, I think, and this is just, what is the cost to do this? So what Claude account level are you using? Is this the $20 a month account or the?
I'm actually, I have the $200 a month account, but because I do a lot of AI stuff, but you can do it with the API. You can do it with the $100 a month. It depends on how much usage you have. I mean, to be honest with you, if I was if I knew what I know about this and I just had a regular development company and I wasn't doing anything except for just using Claude to do this kind of thing, I mean, $200 a month is pretty cheap for quite a few different employees, because I can have Claude work on multiple things at the same time and have it do a lot of tasks that would take me a very long time to do. I can have it do it. So as you learn, and you use it more and more, you'll realize that, whatever the level, even up to the $200 a month, is still a bargain compared to what it would take to hire somebody to do what it's doing.
I think it would be great to clarify a bit that The MCP implementation that you're seeing here is not generic. Part of the reason that in this case Claude Code is able to generate the data is we've pulled the structure from the core CRM database specifically. And so that provides Claude Code with the structure it needs to be able to create the data that's accurate for the database. It
Right.
leverages the same logic that we know and love and the same schema that we know and love from within FileMaker. That's what makes it powerful, in my opinion.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah. What's next?
Ready to everybody buckle your seatbelts again, ready to move again. So this is just from a salesperson using this database that has like this data in it like this. And I told her, what do I need to cover my 3 p.m. sales call today? So what it's actually looking at is appointments in the database. And I'm going to, over here, I have this appointment for my customers, and these appointments were created by Claude on the fly just as test data, but it could be live data. And because I had it created as a story and full information about it, I can query that and say, okay, it's reaching out again to the database, and it's say, okay, it gets the different events. Okay, searching for event records. Okay, I found your 3 p.m. call. Let me pull up the contact details and recent notes. So it goes through and pulls up the notes and stuff from that record. And here's everything you need for your 3 p.m. call with Alan Russo from Vintage Valley Wine Collective. And it has the purpose of the call, board meeting, and the talking points you need, the status. Here's the deal summary about the solar panel system that you have set up. Today you have the call with Elena on 122. The board has the final vote, and all of that information. Sorry about that weird zoom, but all that information is coming out of notes that are here in the system. So you have like notes and appointments. That's okay. Tell me about Tech Hub co-working deal and what's the status of that. And it's going through and searching the records, looking through notes, and looking at event records. And so here's the Tech Hub co-working deal specs. Has your primary contact, the address, system, original estimate, and it says you have 3 proposals that you put out, and they're reviewing those. And here's your internal champion for it. Here are the different options. Here are your key players that you're talking to. Here's pending actions, things that Melissa needs to do, and Kevin needs to do, and then what you need to do. Next, I ask it, say, what are all of my open action items across all of my customers? And it's going through, it's going and listing the contacts to get all, say, what are all my contacts. It goes through and it says, okay, here's your things. Today you have a call with Alina, 10 a.m. call with Rachel, then offer to attend the 122 board meeting via Zoom. Here's what you need to do this week, what you need to do next week. Here's customer action items that you can follow up on. All of this information is out of the database, and here's overdue follow-ups. This because this is test data, has like $800,000 worth of follow-ups that I've missed according to this. So, but yeah, so it has like all of the critical information that is buried in the database, within notes, within appointments, within all these kind of things. And by asking questions, it can go through and search the database in different ways and different tables in order to pull up the data that you need in order to use the data in a much better way than you having to dig down through that database to get it. All right, any questions on that? I'm sure there probably are, but
all right, I think we should keep moving.
Okay.
Just because there's a lot of questions about how do I get started and how do I set up. So.
All right, so this real quick, I want to run through this, and oops, I need my phone to get I'm actually authenticating into a 2-factor authentication with Claris this is a web viewer app that is running in FileMaker that is actually doing the same. I built this while I was waiting for Claris to build their UI that Louis will be going over, but I will be releasing this to thing to everybody. I have different tools that I can use and how I can edit them. And you will be able to run these tools just to test your MCP as well, but that's something I'm still working on right now. Also, this is something that is not as clear in Claris's version, I think, but whenever you are in production version of this, you actually can move it between. No, it's not working right now, but you can drag these around and move it back into editing, and it will make a copy of it that is a branch, so you can actually keep this running while you're making edits to the branch, and then roll it back live again to update those edits. But I wanted to just move past that quickly. One of the last use cases I have here, I actually had Claude go through and create a bunch of invoices here. So this one is actually for a catering company, and I have 22 invoices with different SKUs and descriptions and items, everything like that. And I had Claude go through and parse all of that data into the core CRM database again, and it went through and read all of those individual line items, the SKUs, the description, and like that are over here in my items. I can see, here's my appetizer SKUs, here's the name and the description, the price, parse all of this information out of those PDFs and created the contacts related to those PDFs and the sales records that represent those invoices as well. So I reproduced all of a folder of like 22 invoices here. Had Claude reproduce it into the database. You could use this if, for example, you have a database crash and you can't use your live system and you can't get there's some problem where you can't get the data, but you have a backup and you have to do manual recovery where you have a bunch of invoices that were printed and you can go back through and re-ingest them to try to make up data instead of people having to manually enter that data. Or if you have somebody with a new system and you want to do the same thing, maybe they were on a different type of system that doesn't have the export available or whatever, and just another option for being able to put this, get your data out and make it usable. So those are the demos at warp speed, and we will double back now and get everybody back. Let everybody catch their breath and catch up to.
Yes, thank you, Mike, for the inspiring demos. And now, Yichen, why don't you show just a few kind of examples? These aren't going to be full demos, but Yichen has some great examples of where you can bring MCP as a use case for your customers and your users.
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. Michael walked through a few really great examples for generating data, summarization, as well as looking up information. I want to broaden the aperture a little bit more by walking through a few more business-oriented use cases before we dive into how the configuration process actually looks like. So just a note, the following screenshots are taken from Claude while connected to an existing FileMaker job tracking application. And the tables that are in that job tracking application will be jobs, services, and technicians. And these artifacts shown are directly generated by Claude on the fly, and there is no coding involved. But you could also choose other AI clients that you prefer. I saw a question earlier whether Claris MCP works with ChatGPT Business yet. So the quick answer there is that we're working on enabling the OAuth for ChatGPT. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, so the first use case, let's look at self-service analytics, getting quick insights without building custom reports. So imagine that you are a facility operations manager and your company has a job tracking system in FileMaker. Your goal is workload balancing across the team. You want to do some proactive planning that keeps the team morale high while ensuring the jobs get done on time. So you can ask Claude, show me my in-progress jobs that are allocated across the different team members based on the different priority levels. Claude will generate a dynamic dashboard similar to this, which you can then interact with. And it could also give you some more actionable items, such as who are most available, what are your recommendations looking like. So things like these, it will take a very short amount of time rather than having to build a custom report. So the next one is, let's see. If you're a finance manager trying to understand which services are most profitable, you can also just ask AI to perform a cost analysis. So AI pulls data from your jobs and services table and creates analysis showing revenue breakdown, job distribution, as well as cost patterns, giving you more strategic insights instantly. Now let's take a look at how it works with workflow automation. So MCP doesn't just read the data, it also drives actions. From a lot of our conversations with our FileMaker community, calling scripts via MCP might actually be a preferred use case due to its flexibility and higher level of control, because scripts make a lot of sense because they provide a familiar place to manage the logic, error handling, and business rules. So here I have a customer service rep getting a call from a customer about her garage door. Instead of manually creating an order, checking schedules, and filling out the forms, they can ask AI, create a job for Annie Mae, the customer name, and assign it to the technician with the lightest workload. And AI can search for the active jobs, analyze workloads, and find a technician who is idle, creates the work order, assigns it, and then confirms it all in seconds. And you can definitely automate complex workflows with natural language to eliminate these manual steps in between. And as a developer, you could always add in more human in the loop controls in the middle to make sure that you have more control before actions are executed. So now you've seen a variety of use cases. I want to turn it over to Louis to show the configuration piece. But before that, maybe we can take a look at the questions.
Yeah, I think the biggest question is how do I set this up? And then there are some related configuration questions. So I think Louis, why don't you jump in and walk through the configuration?
Thank you, Rosemary. So here's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you the complete setup from absolutely nothing to a working MCP connection that you can use in Claude Desktop. Now, as you heard from Yichen configurator, this is configuration and not code. Most customers need only about 5 minutes to do this end to end. We're going to go a little bit deeper and we'll create a configuration in under 10 minutes. Before we dig in, we should cover some of the prerequisites required. There aren't many, but it's good to start off prepared. Claris MCP is compatible with FileMaker Server 22.0.2 or later. It requires the OData and Data API services to be enabled on your FileMaker server. The account used to create connections to FileMaker must also have the FMREST and FMOData extended privilege sets enabled. And finally, because Claris MCP is built upon the Claris platform, the account creating and sharing context must have access to Claris Studio as a team manager.
And there's one question super relevant to all of this, and that is, will Claris make this available to servers, FileMaker servers that are not available publicly? Like there's concern, like there's been a lot of concern in chat about being required to make your FileMaker server available to the internet.
So that's definitely something we've heard. I will say from an engineering perspective, it's absolutely something we're looking at. I won't necessarily say when or how that'll be delivered, but it's absolutely something we've heard and something that we will be digging into.
And can you go back to that slide again briefly?
Sure.
To show the requirements. Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, so I think a keynote is you do need to have your FileMaker server available on the internet to configure MCP.
That's right. Much like the OData and data APIs, the same connection rules apply there. Yeah. And we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Okay.
So with that out of the way, let's start from scratch. We'll begin by introducing the MCP configuration UI, which is what you see on screen. The configuration UI will guide us through the necessary steps to create MCP tools that will allow our AI to talk to FileMaker. We'll start by creating a context. A context contains the MCP resources, prompts, and tools generated by our connections to FileMaker. Let's say we want to create a context to allow a coordinator to search through service requests, identify available technicians, and assign technicians to a request, just like Yichen showed earlier. First, we'll give our context some descriptive information. We'll call it the service coordinator context, and then we'll provide a short description so we can remember it for later. Once we've done so, we can create the context and then begin by adding a connection to FileMaker. That connection will be used to generate the tools based on the tables and scripts that we choose. To create a connection, we'll provide a name. In this case, I'm going to connect to my PeakWorks database, so I'll call it my PeakWorks connection, the FileMaker server domain that I'll be connecting to, and the username and password for a database account we've created for MCP. Let's finish creating the connection, and then we'll circle back to how these connections are secured. The configuration UI will use the information we provide to populate a list of databases, tables, and scripts for us to choose when creating tools. I'll select my PeakWorks database, and then I'll go through and pick the first table I'd like. In this case, I want to pick the contacts table. Then I'll use the handy search functionality to select the services table. It's that easy. Next, we'll configure the script we want our AI to be able to execute. FileMaker scripts, as you heard from Yichen, are great for complex tasks, and they provide a level of control over how our AI interacts with our database. When we click confirm, all of our MCP tools are configured for us automatically. It's just that easy. The UI makes it easy to switch between tool types. We can also search for just the tools that we're looking for. In this case, we don't want records to be deleted by any AI clients. So let's quickly disable those tools. Each tool that is created, as Mike showed earlier, is using the schema from the tables we selected. These schema details would allow AI to accurately execute tools to create and update records in our database. Now, as we all know, scripts are powerful, but they can also be abstract. Scripts can accept any string parameter, and this is where our experience and knowledge as FileMaker developers is a benefit. Let's take a look at the script we want to call using this tool. This is our PeakWorks database at the other end of our MCP connection. We're going to bring up the script workspace and open the assign job script to dig into some of its logic. This particular script will accept some parameters and then use logic in FileMaker to make sure that the correct records are created. The script uses a custom function to ensure that the correct script parameters are passed. This particular script requires a job ID and a technician ID to execute successfully. With that in mind, let's head back to the configuration UI and update our tool to provide a description and an updated input to help guide the AI. Now, both the description and the input schema are important details that will enable our AI client to execute our script accurately. We'll go into our script tool and add a description and then update the tool's input. A tool description helps AI understand the purpose of the tool and under what circumstances it should use the tool on behalf of the end user. The configuration UI gives us the ability to update a tool's input using either a web form, like you see here, or JSON. The UI accepts JSON schema-based definitions, which will allow us to easily update the tool's input. This schema tells our AI that the script accepts two parameters of job ID and technician ID, and that both of those parameters are required. Now, I promised we'd get back to security when we were creating the connection, so let's get into those details now.
Actually, before you do that, Louis, there's a couple of questions. If you can
Sure.
back up a little bit, where did all those operations come from? Like everything that's here on tools, like the create jobs record, create services records, back on the all tab.
Sure. All those tools are created based on the table schema that I have and the scripts that I select.
Okay,
So
just
I
to
went
be
through
clear, Claris MCP figures that all out based on the structure of your FileMaker database, and then creates all of that for you automatically.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So back to security for a moment, because I know that that's a topic that most of us have questions on. Similar to the best practices for OData and the data API connections, MCP connections should be configured with the least privileges required for connecting to the client. Claris MCP uses the same security model provided by FileMaker for years. To enable a secure connection, accounts should be created that are dedicated to MCP use. Each account created should have a custom privilege set with the required permissions, and the permission set must have FM OData or FM REST extended privilege sets enabled. If we need more granular access, we have the ability to set record, layout, and script rules. For our use case, we don't want to provide the client access to our archive data, so let's use the design access to remove it. Just to quickly recap, we require the FM REST extended privilege set to access FileMaker database via the data API, which is used to list scripts and retrieve container URLs. We also need the FM OData extended privilege set, which is required to access the FileMaker database via the OData API. More granular permissions can be set via FileMaker's security designs access. Record settings provide customizable scope per table, fields, and records, which allows fine-grained security for your data. Layout settings control layout access, which is used to retrieve container fields. And scripts, which are used to control, Claris simply uses the same solid, granular, and predictable security layers that FileMaker has provided to us for years. With that in mind, let's go back to our MCP configuration we've created and configured our tools. And we'll go to the next step by testing and deploying our context to Claude Desktop. Before we do, let's discuss our deployment strategy for our context. Claris MCP introduces a modern development strategy modeled around the software development lifecycle. Context starts off in an editing state. This state allows us to create connections and refine the tools we've seen. Once context has been sufficiently refined, we can transition our context to the testing state. This state allows us to test how our AI clients perform in real-world scenarios where we can run evaluations in the state or gauge consistency and accuracy and even get early feedback from users. This testing state allows us to build the confidence that our AI and MCP tools will behave in the manner and provide the value that we expect. Once we have sufficient testing and we're confident, we can share the context with our end users by moving the context to a deployed state. Once context is in the deployed state, its configuration is set, and it can only be updated intentionally by a developer. This provides a safeguard against unintentional behavior changes for end users and ensures predictability. Let's finish up by testing and deploying our context to Claude Code. We'll move our context to the testing state and then choose the right configuration for our AI client. While we're working with Claude Desktop today, Claris MCP is compatible with many MCP clients. We provide several of the most popular configuration formats available for you to use. All you have to do is copy the applicable context and paste it into Claude Desktop configuration. It's just copy-paste. To configure Claude Desktop, we'll navigate to Claude Settings and open the configuration file. We can then head back to the Developer Settings area once we've pasted in our configuration, give Claude a quick restart, and then we should be able to see it running. Once that's done and we've confirmed that it's running, we can switch back into Claude and ask it a question to understand what capabilities it has. I'll ask it, what tools do you have access to? Claude's going to think for a minute and then output a list of the tools and capabilities we added through Claris MCP. Next, I'll ask it a question that's more relevant to my data set, that peak work standard that we saw earlier. I'll ask it what the top priorities are for me today. Claude will then use the search jobs tool, which is created by Claris MCP, to retrieve the jobs that are ready to be worked on today and provide us an analysis of the jobs ranked by priority. I'm saying Claude.
Yes, he's saying Claude, the AI assistant.
Thank you, Rosemary. So with that in mind, now that we know that Claude is configured the way that we want, let's go back and deploy our context. This is as simple as when we transitioned from editing to testing. We're comfortable with the configuration, so head back up to the transition area and we'll choose deployed changes. Now that this is done, the MCP configuration UI will let us know that, hey, once this transition happens, everything will be static. And if you notice now, I can't enable or disable or update script information. So that's a 0 to 100 of configuring Claris MCP to work with FileMaker. There's one more thing that I want to really quickly call out, and that is data security and privacy. Before we end, I want to talk about our data security and privacy, because at Claris, protecting your data and privacy isn't just a priority, it's fundamental to everything that we build. The architecture of Claris MCP reflects this commitment through intentional design decisions. We've engineered it from the ground up with privacy at its core, ensuring that the valuable databases you built over the years remain secure and under your control. Traffic is encrypted. Claris MCP does not store any of your FileMaker data. The traffic is encrypted end-to-end throughout Claris MCP. The access is scoped to the FileMaker permission model that you define, and no LLM input or output history is ever saved. Your data never leaves your control. It's privacy by design and not by promise. With that, Rosemary, I'm sure that there's a lot more questions out there. Why don't we see which ones we can dig into?
Yep. So I think the biggest question continues to be like, what am I exposing in FileMaker to the internet? So I'm going to take a stab at it, and then Louis and Yichen and Mike weigh in, because I'm going to try to put this in intermediate FileMaker developer language. So just like if you use the data API for web publishing, or if you turn on FileMaker Web Direct, your FileMaker server is on a URL accessible to the internet by some domain name, and you have restricted permissions that allow certain people with certain privileges to do certain things in your database. So for WebDirect, that would be a direct interface of someone logs in and can browse and create records. What you're setting up with Claris and for Claris MCP access is similar access. You're saying you're setting a scope of permissions for Claris MCP that says somebody using an AI client can do these things in my database. So you're not making your server wide open so that anyone can see any data. It's still permission restricted. Is that clear? And also weigh into chat to tell me if I helped clarify all of that.
It's also using the API key that's generated with from the console when you're setting up the configuration. So it's not just open to that URL. There's a specific API key that's locked down and can't be used without that.
Yep. And there's another question: is does the server have to be hosted in Claris Cloud, or can it be hosted on-prem or in a partner's cloud workspace?
Any publicly accessible FileMaker server can be connected.
All right. And like, there's one other note in the chat. You can also IP restrict access to the server. And we have a knowledge base article that tells you what IP addresses or what ranges should be accessible if you want to already use an existing FileMaker server with Claris Connect and Claris Studio. So it would be those same IP ranges.
Exactly.
Yep. Here's a good question. Someone is testing MCP, but I've found it doesn't understand relationships between tables. How do you train it to understand those?
Part of that is from how your naming conventions and also your field level comments. If you have field level comments, for example, in your foreign keys, to say this is the foreign key for such and such table, it does a much better job of creating those relationship logic. Because you can say, okay, this is the foreign key for that table, this is the foreign key for that table, and it kind of figures it out. But you can also prompt it around that as well.
So, Michael, that's actually a excellent segue. It's something that I believe Yichen we can actually talk about a bit. Relationships is, from an engineering perspective, something we definitely want to get into, and we think that there is valuable information that we could automatically configure for you. But one of the other ways that we're looking to enable this in an easier and faster way is to enable prompts. And so very soon you'll see prompt features built into the Claris MCP service so that in the prompts, you can describe the relationships between your tables. And when that prompt is executed, your AI client would then know exactly the relationships between the tools.
I'm just going to add one more thing. We have about 5 minutes left. So if you, before you leave, please fill out our closing survey questions. Let us know where you might use Claris MCP and if you're confident to get started or not. And I'm getting the sense that maybe not. So I think I'm going to invite all of you back, or at least Louis and Mike back, for a follow-up session, probably in February, either February 12th or February 26th. So we can do a little bit of a deeper dive and maybe a slower walkthrough of the setup with more time for just getting started.
I would love that. I believe
All
Michael is
right.
speaking for you. I think you would as well.
Yes.
Very much so.
And yeah, and I've like gone through the questions have been coming so fast. It's hard to choose what would be most helpful.
Hans, I had a quick question about, he asked me how long it took me to do the setup with the DDL and the prompting, that kind of stuff. It actually was very fast. Like I used in the console or whatever, I did the get table DDL with all tables, and then I copied and pasted that, or added that as a file, so it would have thing. But even that I only used whenever I was doing the web browser, the chatless atlas. The other stuff, you don't need to give it that structure, because some of the tools that are part of the MCP allows it to query and see the structure of the database. So it doesn't need to, you don't have to figure that out for it. It will query and get whatever it needs. But same thing with Claude skills. I would encourage people, if you're going to be using Claude, look into that, because Claude will write skills for you, and then it now knows how to do this thing from now on. And so you just tell it what you want it to do. It figures out how to write that skill. It adds it to itself, and then you're good to go. So very useful.
All right, and I think I'm going to ask one last question because this came up a few times, and that is, where are the servers for Claris MCP hosted?
The Claris MCP servers are hosted on the Claris platform, which are the IP addresses that Rosemary, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think they're specifically asking what regions, because if you have to be GDPR compliant, if you're in Europe, is there an MCP server in Europe so that you're processing in Europe at this time, or is that a future?
Currently, we are US only, although you are welcome to try Claris MCP outside of the US. We're supporting US only for now. We do have plans to go to other regions as well as we build out the platform.
All right, so thank you for that. Lastly, just before you log off, watch the Claris community in your email. Our next community live will be on January 29th, so 2 weeks from today. And I will be joined by Todd Geist from Proofgeist and David Willison from Devon.fm. And we're going to talk about DevOps for FileMaker. So that's for sure our next session. And then I think we'll do another MCP session in February. And we're also working on a Claris Studio session, just an update on all things Claris Studio. So please stay tuned for those, and bring your questions to the community thread that I know we've dropped in chat a few times, or just to the Claris MCP topic or the Claris AI topic in the community. There's lots of people with experience available to answer questions. So thank you, Mike, Louis, and Yichen. for joining me today, and thank you to everyone who watched in the audience and watched YouTube and the Claris Academy for the recording later today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.